Pro Football Focus ranked Dak Prescott as the number 17 quarterback heading into the 2025 season. What? We'll break it down next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to talk about some players that are on the roster that you shouldn't forget about, including several reserve offensive linemen. But Landon, let's start with this story from Pro Football Focus. One of our favorite sites, our guy John Owning is the editor over there. But we're going to pick on them a little bit today. They've got tough skin. They can handle it. Dak Prescott was ranked as the number 17th quarterback coming into the 2025 season. Again, we are in late May. We're officially in list season, Landon. So be prepared for these for the next 2 months as we get closer to training camp. But anyways, Dak Prescott, 17th overall quarterback. I'm going to name some quarterbacks that are ranked ahead of him.
Boy. Let's do it.
Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, 10th overall, Jared Goff, 9th overall. Now, here's the breakdown from the site. I'm going to read it to you, then I'm going to give you the floor.
Okay.
Here's what they say. Prescott remains the epitome of a quarterback who thrives against weaker opponents, but falters when the competition stiffens. He earned a 90 PFF grade in 2023, behind only Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, before a late season collapse ended his MVP bid. In 2024, the Cowboys stumbled early in a season-ending injury, sidelined Prescott before he could rebound. To rejoin the top 10 conversation, he must recapture the 2023 form and prove that he can deliver against the league's best. Landon, the floor is yours.
So he was in the MVP conversation and then didn't do as well as being an MVP. And then he got injured. And now he's in the bottom half of quarterbacks in the NFL. Is that the story that's being presented? Real quick, let me be clear. I wanted to get back to this because John Owning, I'm sure, doesn't mind us bagging on PFF. As long as you guys go click on the article and check it out yourselves. Please go take a look.
They do fantastic work. This is just one of the articles where
and this is exactly what they want. They're content creators, so we love it. So, but yeah, this is definitely designed to make me mad. This is disrespectful. This is, again, I feel like it's like a lot of other things, and you get used to it as a Cowboys fan, just as part of being, it comes with the meal, as they say, Jerry says all the time, where the little things get treated like big things here. It's because you're under the spotlight. It's not that the Cowboys' lack of playoff success is a little thing, but I mean, the negatives that they point out for Dak kind of pale in comparison to the positive aspects of what's going on. And I think you could probably examine several of the names that you mentioned up front, and they would have very similar looking warts, right? And probably not being knocked quite as hard, while maybe not even hitting the same level of highs that Dak has hit in the last few years. So I think it's just disrespectful in the sense that when Dak is healthy, is there any question that he's in the top half of quarterbacks in the NFL? When you watch Dak, it's I don't know, it's really hard. I understand when you list it out, it's difficult, but it's there's some of those names are also players who are clearly not the victims of circumstance, but the opposite of that. The benefactors of circumstance, right? And some of that circumstance is gone. I mean, I'd like to see if guys that have lost their OCs. There's two of those names that you mentioned specifically that lost their high-powered OCs. That I'll see if they have the same kind of success without that situation around them.
I got so many thoughts here. I can't wait to get them all out. So
Please.
First of all, I like Justin Herbert. I would probably take Justin Herbert over Dak, just saying that. However, one of the criticisms, and I talked to the author of this article, John Costco, And I admitted, like, does Dak Prescott need to be better in the postseason? Absolutely. Do the Cowboys need to be better in the postseason? Absolutely. I'm conceding that. But you can't say, well, Dak needs to be better in the postseason, but put Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, Justin Herbert, and Kyler Murray ahead of them when those four quarterbacks have a combined one playoff win between them, right? Like, yes, Dak has his shortcomings in the postseason. So do a lot of the other quarterbacks that are in that same range. And then you start going through some of this, and I was texting with one of my friends, Elliot Harrison, formerly of NFL.com, and we were making our own list. And you start to get to some of these quarterbacks, and it's like, Jared Goff, he's only been really good when he's got an elite supporting cast, but he's had some major problems in the postseason throughout his career. Absolutely. Geno Smith has been a full-time starter for 3 seasons, and the Seahawks are 0-1 in the postseason. They've only been there once with him. He just got traded for a third-round pick. Trevor Lawrence has been a disaster in 3 of the 4 years he's been in the league. I understand if you want to keep Dak outside the top 10 quarterbacks, but you're going to have a really hard time getting past 12.
I mean, the problem is that this feels like a ranking of what they're against those individual players' expectations.
It's
as
like
opposed to an actual ranking
almost.
Of player.
Yeah, like they're trying to predict what's going to happen in 2025.
Yeah, which I mean, again, like and it's a lot of dart throwing kind of prediction. It's like, I don't know. Again, I think we've laid out the case pretty strong here. That and I think when you talk about, I think you and I basically said the same thing, where all these other guys have those warts. That several of those guys, maybe 6 to 7 of the guys that are listed above Dak, have similar warts, if not worse, of the things that get constantly listed for Dak, but don't have the consistency or the high highs that Dak has. And he doesn't get as much of the benefit as he does for the negatives, which are the minority of what his career has been. So and again, it's not even necessarily like, I think it's been pretty clear that when Dak has a realistic supporting cast around him to throw the football, and he's able to stay upright, like, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I think putting him outside of the top half is just disrespectful. Like, I don't know how else to put it, to be honest.
I'm laughing because Elliot's texting me right now all these stats about, like, Jared Goff and bad weather. And he's not a Dak fan at all. Like, he's just not a big Dak fan, but even he admits it's really hard, like, to make an argument for him outside of the top 12. I think there's this misconception that Cowboy fans think like Dak Prescott, because he's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, is a top 5 or top 6 passer. We're not even saying that. We're not even making that argument. We're saying that he's closer to 10 than he is 20, which is what that article suggests.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I mean, I think we should be having the argument still further the other direction, but I'm certainly not going to be having this argument anywhere in the bottom half of the league of quarterbacks. That's, again, absolutely disrespectful and ridiculous would not consider it of what this guy has done in this league. And it's not like there's been a huge decline in his play when he's been healthy.
Last thing before we go, I understand the argument that Dak maybe doesn't play as well against really good teams as he does against bad teams. Newsflash, that's all quarterbacks in the NFL. It's really hard to beat good teams. Yeah. That's why they typically don't perform that well. Like, I do think there's something for beating the teams that you should. I think Dak Prescott has done a really good job of that. He also has done a really good job of winning in the division, a 33-8 record in the division. I do think that matters if he can eventually start to beat some of these teams like the Packers, who are worse than them in the playoffs. I think he'll kind of quiet some of the doubters. That's all.
Absolutely. And I think also some of the thing to consider there real quick is that, some of that is about who he's playing with, and like some of those situations, it's been about Dak trying to do this all by himself. And that's been the problem. You know what I'm saying? Like, so if Dak had enough help, like some of these other folks that have had success against good teams, then I think you will see him have similar success.
All right, that's enough negativity for a fantastic Monday. Let's be positive, Landon. Let's talk about some players that maybe aren't getting enough attention right now for the Dallas Cowboys. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and your spending in one place so you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. I've started using Monarch Money over the last 3 or 4 months, and I've realized how much money that I was wasting on coffee, takeout, drive-through, like just pointless stuff in my life. But now I am budgeting smarter and I am saving more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Landon, let's discuss some players that maybe we forgot about or haven't talked about enough over the last couple months that maybe could make an impact this year. Who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, these are all guys that, like, you know, that are on the roster where sometimes they were free agents that were signed. Sometimes they're guys that have been on the roster in other means, but they're definitely going to be in training camp. They're going to be competing, but maybe they've been put into weird positions because of some of these last few weeks, the roster moves and the draft, right? So I guess the first guy I wanted to bring up, just because I saw him today on social media doing a thing at a flag football event for the Dallas Cowboys, was Paris Campbell. It was, you know, and it was just kind of a reminder, hey, with the George Pickens trade and all of the talk we've been talking about with, okay, cool, this slots Mingo and Tolbert as kind of sharing that 3 role, and Brooks and Florida will try to, you know, fight for a spot. We got Turpin. And Cropper had a really good day. And it's like, we have not discussed this guy that was actually the only free agent signing that the Cowboys made at the wide receiver position, at Paris Campbell. And it's not like there's huge expectations here. I mean, I think that's why he's kind of snuck under the radar a lot in our conversations, is that, you know, we're not expecting him to come in here and blow us away and take away that wide receiver 3 spot from Tolbert or even to come in and be part of the rotation. But I think he is a veteran wide receiver. He's a guy that's been in a couple different camps and a couple of different teams. And he's not going to go quietly into that good night. He's got a skill set. He's fast. He's got some speed to him. He can get down the field. You know, he's kind of like these guys that come out every year that we all now compare to DJ Moore, right? Where you almost feel like he's a running back playing wide receiver at times. But, you know, I think he's a guy that has a little bit of a unique skill set on this team. And maybe that makes him kind of stick out and shine a little bit. And maybe you find a useful role for him, or maybe he ends up getting cut. We'll find out in August.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago he had a 600-yard season with the Colts, 2022. I was listening to Sirius NFL radio probably 3 months ago, and Bill Polian was on talking about the signing. And he said, you know, hey, Paris Campbell was somebody that we had in Indianapolis, one of the greatest practice players you'll ever see. But whenever he's nicked up and banged up, he's just not the same guy. So if you can get him on the field healthy, he can be, you know, a factor into your offense. I think it's easy to dismiss these guys like the guy I'm going to mention next and just say, well, hey, they have CeeDee Lamb, they have George Pickens, they have Jalen Tolbert. Who cares about Paris Campbell? Knock on wood that those guys stay healthy, right? You just never know. What if Jalen Tolbert tweaks his knee and he's going to miss a month? Then you're going to need to start relying on some of these other receivers, Landon. And that's why I wanted to mention Jalen Brooks, somebody that the Cowboys spent a 7th-round pick on. He played more last year than you might remember. He did have 30 targets. There were a couple games where he made some big-time plays, including Pittsburgh. He plays on special teams. He's got a big body. I would say right now, if everybody's healthy, he's not a lock to make the 53-man roster, but I wouldn't necessarily rule him out either.
Yeah, because I mean, he's one of the guys that like is has experience with this team. I mean, the offense. That's the interesting thing. The offensive guys have experience in a history with Schottenheimer, so he knows these guys a little bit. So it's not like a clean slate necessarily for them. They have experience, whether that's good or bad. And Brooks was a guy that he earned those 30 targets with his play the previous season as a rookie, right? Kind of a late round pick, but was able to come in and actually take snaps and show up, like actually perform. Not huge plays, but making catches and big plays when you're making a first down when you're a 7th round pick receiver. Like that's enough that earns you an opportunity the next season, right? And obviously, I think it was a little bit underwhelming what we got from him in 24. Once they gave him a little bit more. But again, maybe he ingests that and he becomes back a different player. And the competition between him and Flanoy will help kind of
another
promote
guy
him a little bit,
right?
Yeah, and kind of to your point, like I think he's a guy that could be a backup for some of these guys if there's an injury. And I think Paris Campbell could be a guy, like I mentioned, to like Turpin, right? Because if you want to have Turpin in a role where you're actually injecting him into the offense, if you become reliant on that role, you're going to need somebody to kind of sub in if something happens to Turpin. If he pulls a hammy or something, having Paris Campbell potentially on the practice squad or something like that gives you the opportunity to like not just abandon that part of your offense if you have somebody who suffers an injury. So I do think that some of these guys, even though they're not going to make noise on the top of the pecking order, or maybe even get a bunch of targets, if there's an injury, you'll be certainly thrilled to have someone like that.
And I wonder, like with Jonathan Mingo, who, I mean, the Cowboys gave up a 4th round pick in this year's draft. If Brooks is just better in training camp,
yeah,
because of the Pickens trade, maybe they just won't be as willing to give him a roster spot. Maybe they're truly going to have whoever's the best receivers in camp. So don't forget about these guys, Paris Campbell, Ryan Flournoy, and Jalen Brooks. Maybe they steal a spot.
I got one more guy, Denzel Jackson, right? And the reason that he's worth bringing up is that he actually got some snaps at different points. He was an undrafted free agent that certainly was a long shot to make the roster last year, but showed up and did some things, and now has become eligible as an international player because he was born in the Bahamas. So what that means is that he's going to be on the roster because he has a roster exemption. So look out for him as a guy that just another person in the defensive tackle rotation. He's a stout guy. Maybe he could be part of this run defense rotation early in early downs, give him some opportunity to just be a part of the roster and be a part of the rotation inside.
And I'm going to give you one more. Tyrus Wheat. This is somebody who has moved from linebacker to defensive end. I think he's probably going to be a defensive end for them this year. Yeah. He was an undrafted free agent, but he's been on the team the last 2 years. I don't know what Matt Eberflus thinks about him, but they're always looking for some of these bigger body guys that can stop the run. If I had to guess now, I'm going to say he doesn't make the 53-man roster. But again, you're talking about a young player who's played quite a few snaps and most importantly, has a lot of special teams experience. They're going to keep some of these guys because of special teams reasons, looking for different body types. He's just one to kind of keep an eye on in training camp. If he can take that next step and become somebody that you feel comfortable giving 10 to 15 snaps a game on defense, maybe he makes a roster.
All right, one more. I'm sorry, I lied. One more.
Go ahead.
Luke Barku, right? He's a guy that you know that I've loved for
2020
a long time.
draft, baby.
That's right. He came out of San Antonio, if I'm not mistaken. But he was a guy that was extremely productive on the ball in college, and I was a little bit shocked that the Cowboys didn't get him in undrafted free agent. I think he ended up being an undrafted free agent, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Went to Jacksonville.
So I was a little surprised that he didn't come to Dallas, or that they didn't try hard, because he is kind of that sort of corner, long, tall, extremely, like I said, extremely productive on the ball. I think he led the NFL. I'm sorry, it led the NCAA in interceptions, if I'm not mistaken, his last season at San Antonio. Has managed to carve out a little career, has been stuck around and been a fighter. I don't know if he's going to make the squad, but he's a 27-year-old guy who's bounced around. He's got some experience, and in this system where you're looking for opportunistic zone corners, maybe he makes a play here and there. Maybe he makes it interesting for one of these guys in front of him.
Yeah, we'll see. There's a lot of open spots in the cornerback room. Maybe he can grab one. Let's talk about a couple of reserve offensive linemen who could make some noise for the Cowboys this year. We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Lena, let's talk about a couple reserve offensive linemen because we know, or at least we think we know, that Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, and Tyler Booker are going to be your three starting interior offensive linemen. Who else shouldn't we forget about?
Well, we've talked about the signing of Rob Jones, right? We even mentioned the Sadiq Charles signing. He's an interesting guy. That was an LSU guy that made it in, with ended up retiring and coming back. We'll talk about him in a second. Because we have to get to a guy that I don't even know that we've mentioned on this podcast yet, and his name is Akeem Adeshine, and he's actually listed as a tackle, but he's got a lot of experience at tackle and both sides and guard. But this is a guy who, when playing for Cincinnati, has a lot of experience playing football. I mean, he has playoff experience, starting experience on both left side of the offensive line. It's not great experience, but he has done it before, and unfortunately for the last 2 seasons he hasn't gotten on snap logged. He's whether it's been injury or just not being rosterable, I guess, or playable on the field. But another guy that's he's only 27 years old. They signed him. He's listed as a tackle, so I would imagine that this is a guy who is going to be kind of your backstop swing tackle candidate at training camp, right? Like, break glass in case of emergency, in case Awesome Richards just can't handle it, or whoever your swing tackle de jour is that they preferred. This is their veteran version of Rob Jones, basically, for the Cowboys.
So I got the breakdown in snaps. 179 career snaps at left tackle. Almost 800 at right guard, 437 at right tackle. So he really has been kind of a Swiss Army knife for your offensive line. But the Cowboys have had success doing this. They turned Chuba Udoka, somebody who was almost out of the league, who was drafted by the Jets, I think, in the 3rd round, into a pretty serviceable left tackle who was also, kind of starting over Tyler Guyton secretly at the end of the year, and got a pretty nice payday by Jacksonville this offseason. So I wouldn't be surprised if Akeem is their latest reclamation project at tackle. I wanted to bring up Brock Hoffman because we talked about Brock Hoffman a lot during the season. And then after the season, it just felt like a given that he was going to get a chance to be the starting right guard. Brian Schottenheimer talked about him a lot. I believe from week 10 on, he was a top 10 guard according to Pro Football Focus. The running game got better when he was in there. He gave them some attitude, some nastiness. But with the drafting of Booker, signing Sadiq Charles, signing Robert Jones, bringing in, or keeping TJ Bass, I wonder what the role is here for Brock Hoffman.
I mean, the drip of this offseason for him must have been like, water torture, right?
Yeah.
Because it started out, like we said, they signed Rob Jones, who was, not the top of the market guard, but a guy who had started games, for Miami. And I think that they felt like was a really good fit in their system. And you're like, okay, interesting. There's going to be some competition here. And then Sadiq Charles obviously was a guy that we weren't really sure exactly what the plan is, but he's a roll of the dice. That doesn't necessarily mean anything for Brock Hoffman or his spot here. And then obviously the real punch to the gut was Tyler Booker. And suddenly now it's like what it means is with that one pick, right, is that not only did Brock Hoffman, lose potentially his starting spot, but he's got competition for the backup swing interior guy. Right?
The other part of this is if you look at the size of the guys that they either have on the roster or they have signed or drafted, Tyler Booker's 330, 340. Robert Jones is 330 pounds. Tyler Smith is a massive left guard. Cooper Beebe's 320 pounds. And then there's Brock Hoffman, who is probably playing at or close to 300 pounds last year. Maybe they just didn't feel like he was big enough to handle a full-time starting guard position. And I wonder, maybe they feel like he's not a gap scheme guard. Maybe he's more of a wide zone guard. And I do wonder, like, could he potentially be a guy that plays well in training camp, plays a bunch of snaps in the preseason, and we see get moved before week 1?
This is, I mean, we talk about it all the time when we are targeting potential trade candidates. Think about back when we were talking about wide receivers. Like, what teams have a change in scheme that kind of changes the angles on a good player? Brock Hoffman is that player for the Cowboys with the way that they've transitioned into this new kind of more gap heavy scheme. It's just like we talked about, with Ferguson and his weight a little bit, or we felt like this weight, except way more extreme, is that, Hoffman was barely clearing the bar as a zone, inside guy as far as weight and size and strength goes, but his play and tenacity kind of overcame that. But now that you switch schemes, it's changed the angles. He doesn't quite clear that bar anymore. It made the Cowboys feel like they had to reinforce that position. So, yes, I do anticipate that he could be a potential trade candidate for a team that loses an interior offensive lineman.
Which stinks because it was really fun watching Hoffman last year. But I even look at someone like TJ Bass, who's 330 pounds. Maybe they just feel like he's a better fit as a swing guard than what Brock Hoffman was. I thought Hoffman was much better last year.
Yeah.
We'll see how it plays out. So keep an eye on Hoffman, who could potentially be a trade target, especially if you need to go get more picks or if you need to go out and get maybe a slot corner or a linebacker. Maybe that's the guy that can help you in some trades. That is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Make sure you check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Make sure you check out the squad shows every Monday and Thursday with Jeff Briggs and Stretch Smith. Those shows have been really fun, hour long. Come get your questions in. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your holiday Monday, and we will see you right back here on Tuesday.